Hello, fellow students. This short presentation will focus on the reasons for, history of, and purpose of the Second Amendment to our Bill of Rights by analyzing the writing itself, writings of people who wrote the amendment, and surrounding historical events to try and grasp a better historically accurate perception of what these words on paper mean and how they apply to your everyday life. We will study different interpretations, whether they hold up under the scrutiny of a Supreme Court case, and the wording of the document. Then I will share with you my opinion on the topic at hand. I hope you enjoy listening to this lecture and possibly learning something from it. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Written by James Madison, this one simple sentence here has become the source of numerous heated debates over the past 60 years. Given that fact, it is important to learn about it and gain a better understanding of it so that you can formulate your own opinions regarding it. With that in mind, let us take this sentence apart piece by piece to better analyze it and gain an understanding of what it means and how it applies to your life. Regulated, as in a well-regulated militia. Let's start there. The meaning of a word changes, like most things do, over the course of time. So what did regulated mean in 1791 when the Second Amendment was ratified? Many today interpret it as meaning limited or heavily controlled, but when the founders wrote the amendment, they had a different regulated in mind. Jack Rakove, a Pulitzer Prize-winning author and a professor of political science and law at Stanford University, has valuable input on this topic. Well-regulated in the 18th century tended to be something like well-organized, well-armed, well-disciplined, said Rakove. It didn't mean regulation in the sense that we use it now, in that it's not about the regulatory state. There's been nuance there. It means the militia was in an effective shape to fight. Now that we have covered regulated, what is a militia? Some believe it to be just the National Guard. And while they may be half right, there's definitely more to the picture. A militia can actually be a couple of different things. Merriam-Webster defines militia as A. A body of citizens organized for military service. B. The whole body of able-bodied male citizens declared by law as being subject to call to military service. C. A private group of armed individuals that operates as a paramilitary force and is typically motivated by a political or religious ideology. Specifically, such a group that aims to defend individual rights against government authority that is perceived as oppressive. So which definition would fit our scenario the best? All of them could actually apply here, but it would be nice if we had some outside reference to look to. Now, luckily for us, we do. U.S. Code 246 defines the militia as A. The militia of the United States consists of all able-bodied males, at least 17 years of age, and, except as provided in Section 313 of Title 32, under 45 years of age, who are or have made a declaration of intention to become citizens of the United States and of female citizens of the United States who are members of the National Guard. B. The classes of the militia are 1. The organized militia, which consists of the National Guard and the Naval Militia, and 2. The unorganized militia, which consists of the members of the militia who are not members of the National Guard or the Naval Militia. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state. Through the dictionary and other references, I think we have a pretty good idea as to what the first clause of this amendment means. The right of the people to keep and bear arms. So, who are the people, and of course, what did this so important phrase mean when it was written? The right of the people. Due to disgustingly racist laws, black and African Americans were prohibited from owning firearms until much later in the history of our nation. By now, however, we have righted this wrong. It is said and done. From all appearances, however, the phrase, the people, means just that. The people of the United States. Everybody, every law-abiding citizen, has the right to bear arms. But what about way back when? Did this right apply to women as well? There are no laws that I could find restricting the rights of females to own and bear arms. Now, I am sure that there were individual stores that might have refused to sell a weapon to a woman, but after extensive research, no laws restricting it. In fact, it probably would have been a good idea for a pioneer woman to be skilled in the art of self-defense using a weapon of some sort, as they often had to defend themselves and their children against wild animals or Indians. No doubt it was definitely frowned upon for women to carry a gun, but it was by no means prohibited. While there were no legal restrictions on the right of a woman to own a firearm, the technology and cost were a bit self-prohibitive. Your average Joe musket from back then would have been something along the lines of a 58 caliber black powder flintlock, constructed out of wood and metal, and measuring roughly 5 feet in length. Not only were these firearms heavy, but they kick like mules. You have to have a good bit of mass to put behind them if you want to avoid getting knocked to the ground. The price of a musket back then also meant that for your average family, there was usually only one firearm per household. That gun would be Dad's gun. He would be the only one allowed to touch it. So on to the next thing. What does the Second Amendment mean by keep and bear arms? Let's start with keep and bear. This essentially means that people have the right to keep arms for defense purposes, and use them against anything they could feel threatened by. It is hard to misinterpret this, and much easier to take it at face value, as most things that are written in this amendment should be. So what are arms? This is important to address, as it is a point of contention for some people. Here's a few nice ones right here. In the United States v. Miller case of 1939, it was decided that the Second Amendment only applied to weapons that could be effectively used in a militia, weapons that have a military use. The Second Amendment did not apply to things such as short-barreled shotguns with no military purpose whatsoever. Arguably, any gun, knife, bayonet, shovel, pointy stick, or moderately sized rock could have a military purpose, but that is beside the point. The founders would have loved the fact that weaponry has advanced as far as it has, would be enthralled that civilians could own some of it. The founders were big fans of weapons development that took special interest in projects such as the Chambers flintlock, which was an early machine gun capable of firing 100 rounds a minute for 2 minutes straight, and used frequently in the War of 1812. All of the founders were very aware of firearms development of this kind, and still made sure that civilians had the ability to own armaments that were relevant to their time. Notice that the term arms is never defined. It can mean absolutely anything. It is one opinion that the founders never could have envisioned the kind of technology that we have today. However, that is doubtful at best. Considering the technology of the time and the people writing and having influence on the amendment, it is more than likely that the founders would have anticipated guns getting better and bigger. Shall not be infringed. Infringe can mean many things: breach, undermine, transgress, violate, and trespass. Merriam-Webster defines infringe as to encroach upon in a way that violates law or the rights of another. I think the Second Amendment makes itself basically self-evident on this point. The founders were saying not to do any of the previously mentioned things to this amendment. Some, like Alexander Hamilton, gave direct instructions as to what the people should do if the government started throwing rights such as this by the wayside. He said, "Should the representatives of the people betray their constituents, there is then no recourse left but in the exertion of that original right, which is self-defense." So why have the Second Amendment in the first place? Our founders believed that it is a safeguard against tyranny. They had just won a war against a tyrannical government. It did so as a result of civilian gun ownership, and admittedly little help from the French. The founders realized that their own government could fall from grace and become oppressive of its citizens. A government is extremely hesitant to trespass on the rights of citizens if they know that there is the possibility of citizens organizing and striking back. They thought that it was not just the right, but the responsibility of the citizen to be armed. Thomas Jefferson put it like this: "The Constitution of most of our states, and of the United States, assert that all power is inherent in the people, that they may exercise it by themselves, that it is their right to be at all times armed." An article from JSTOR makes an interesting point following along on the exact same topic regarding government tyranny. Would arms in the hands of average citizens have made a difference? Could the overstretched Nazi war machine have murdered 11 million armed and resisting Europeans, while also taking on the Soviet and Anglo-American armies. Could 50 to 70,000 Khmer Rouge have butchered 2 or 3 million Cambodians? This really makes one appreciate what the amendment means, and the author does make a good point. Would these terrible governments have been able to carry out their atrocious acts against an armed and trained populace numbering in the tens of millions? Probably not. While this article only mentions the Nazi and the Khmer Rouge, there are multiple other examples of overreaching governments one could come up with, including but not limited to China, the Soviet Union, Venezuela, Cuba, and Guatemala. That's just right off the top of the head right there. There are definitely more that you could come up with if you thought harder. The main point is that our founders really wanted to give its citizens a way to defend themselves. The Second Amendment is ultimately a protection against a tyrannical government, and the best protection of a free one. That is my view, and it was the view of our founders. James Madison, the author of the amendment, put it this way: "The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. A well-regulated militia, composed of the body of the people, trained to arms, is the best and most natural defense of a free country." James Madison, House of Congress, 434, June 8, 1789. Okay, so the Second Amendment gives the people the right to form a militia. To form a militia, however, you must have the right to keep and bear arms. The Second Amendment means the exact same thing that it did over 200 years ago, as crazy as that may sound. So how does this apply to your life? Though it is old, as we just said, the Second Amendment is the same thing that it was so long ago. It is the right that guarantees you, a law-abiding American citizen, the right to keep and bear arms. It recognizes the God-given right of self-defense against anything that threatens your other freedoms. This uninfringible right guarantees you the ability to stand up for yourself. It knows no race, no religion, no creed. It is equally applied to all Americans as the law should be. It gives strength to the weak and a defense for the little man. It is the right and responsibility of every American to bear arms.